Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. Today is a bit of a part 2 to last week's tutorial where I made all of these silicone molds. Actually, I didn't make all of them, I just made the purple ones. Last week I made the molds out of liquid silicone, and then today I'm going to be casting some resin in them to make a new range of earrings for Christmas. So I've got some little add-ins here. I've got some pigment powders, I've got some glitters, some liquid pigments, and a whole range of things that I'm going to be using. I have a bit of a plan, but I never follow my plans when I'm creating, so we'll just have to see how this goes. So I am working outside on my table, which is absolutely filthy, but it has a tablecloth down on it for that reason. The resin we are using today is a 2-part epoxy resin, which is specifically designed for casting. It is a fast cure resin though, so this one you have to work kind of fast with. I don't have quite as much work time as what you do with your normal all-purpose casting resins, and this one here has a quicker full cure time, so it's still going to take approximately 24 hours to set, but a full cure will only be 2 to 3 days rather than the usual 7 days. So I won't be drilling, and I'll demold after 24 hours, but I won't be drilling or doing anything to disturb the resin probably for a good week anyway. But yeah, I do just like the fast cure ones because I'm able to demold faster than what I can with the normal resins. I'm just using my plastic mixing jug here to measure out the resin. So it's measured out in mils rather than grams, and it's 2 parts to 1 part. So just making sure that I'm doing this nice and accurately, just pouring it in nice and slowly. Sometimes it glugs out when it comes out of these big jugs, so just doing it nice and slowly to make sure that I get the right measurements. So you can see that just from pouring the resins in together that there's a few bubbles and things in there. You can see those bubbles. I'm just going to give it a stir just to mix it all up. Don't want to whip it and add extra bubbles, so we're just going to go kind of slowly, just stirring it around. And you can see how it's got that cloudy effect at the moment. We just want to keep stirring until it has gone nice and clear and you don't see any of those streaky ribbon-like effects happening within that resin. So yeah, just a nice good stir, making sure to scrape down all the edges and also occasionally scraping off my stirrer as well, because you want to make sure that it's all mixed in nicely. If it's not mixed properly, you'll get parts that may not set properly because it obviously hasn't had that chemical reaction that needs to occur to make it set. Now you'll also notice that I am wearing gloves and I also have a mask on, and I'm working outside in the well ventilated area. Right, there we go, that's nice and clear, so that is done. As I was saying, yes, it is a chemical, so we want to make sure that we are nice and safe and we don't get contact with our skin. We want to avoid breathing it, and if possible wear some safety glasses as well, because you don't want the resin to flick back into your eyes. Now I have this propagation mold here, which I cast the glitter part 2 probably about a month ago now, and I need to finish it. So I did pour a larger amount of resin today than what I would normally do if I was just doing the earrings. I'm going to use that pigment powder along with the resin to just finish off that propagation mold, so that that is done and that can go into my Christmas stock too. So I'm just going to pour the resin first into the cup. Doesn't matter if you pour the resin first or add the pigment first, either. I kind of mix it up. I probably should have gone with a larger cup though, because this is not enough to do it. But yeah, just adding a bit of the pigment powder there. A little does go a long way though, so just little bits at a time. You can always add more rather than take away. And once again, just giving it a nice stir to make sure that the colour is nice and consistent and well mixed through. Again, if you don't mix it properly and you end up with little pockets of just pigment powder, then it's going to be dusty and it's going to not be a nice solid finish, which we don't want. Right, so I've going to add a little bit more because I'm realizing at this point that it's not going to be enough, and I know that it's still not going to be enough. I'm going to have to probably do a couple of cups worth here. I just thought I would include doing this mold here in this tutorial as well. Today I'm mainly going to focus on the earrings, but I just thought I would show you this part as well, just because it's something a little bit different. And I'm just starting by doing the propagation mold first because I need to get a bulk lot of that resin out of the jug because I don't want too much sitting in there and risking it overheating. The day that I was doing this pour, it is actually quite a warm day, so the warmth of the air also helps to set the resin, and I don't want it to set too fast or for it to overheat and then do a flash cure. All right, so I'm having to add quite a bit extra to this mold. So yeah, just adding a little bit more, and just going to add a little bit more of the pigment powder too, just to strengthen back up that colour. Because I had done the glitter layer underneath, which is well set, I can kind of mix up what I'm pouring in now within the mold as well, because it's not going to disturb that glitter. And that way it'll kind of might give it a bit more of like a marbly effect, or it might mix it together well and just be more of that solid colour. So either I'm happy with. I just need to get it poured and get this demolded and for sale along with the rest of my stock. I quite like using these little plastic measuring cups because they are a really good size. Probably needed a bigger one for this one, but normally they're a really good size, but they're also really easy to clean out as well. So I'll just let the resin cure in each of the cups, and then after a couple of days I'll be able to go back and squeeze the cups, which will crack the resin, and then I can just pull it all out. So I am working on these baking trays today, and the reason I like working on the trays is I can move them around. So I'm able to move that one out the way because I've finished with that part and bring these ones in. So much easier than just working straight with the molds and having to work around where the molds are positioned. I'm also able to then move them into the cupboard afterwards for them to cure without having the dust get onto them. But yeah, I'm able to move them around freely. Now I've got these little add-ins for the resin, little Christmas ones, and I thought that would be really cute to be using in these molds today. So they're kind of what actually inspired me to do a bit of a Christmas range like this. These are sort of the ones that I wanted to mainly focus on. I'm realizing now though that there's not an awful lot in each one of these little segments, so we'll see how many we get done. But yeah, I'm going to add these ones into the cup first, and then I'll add the resin on top. As I said before, it doesn't really matter if you add the resin first and then your mix-ins, or whether you do them first and then the resin. Doesn't really matter either way. But one thing that I do suggest is to be able to mix them in the resin and give them a coating of resin. It helps to stop bubbles from forming. So if I was just to sprinkle these into the mold and then add the resin on top, you would get quite a few bubbles trapped underneath of these pieces. So I do just like to coat them in the resin first, and I find that helps. And I'm going to be really honest here, these were really difficult to work with. It was really hard to try and get an even amount of each shape into each tree so that they look like a pear. Also trying to space out each of the pieces as well, so that I didn't want to have any blank or too much of a blank area, because when I'm pouring the clear resin in, obviously if there's no feature part in, say, one of the points of the tree, it's just, you're not going to be able to see it. So I'm trying to spread them out, make it even, have an even amount of the little Santa heads in each one as well. I didn't want them all in the one. So yeah, I do play around with this a little bit to get all the positionings how I would like. So once I was happy with how I had spaced out each of these little shapes within these trees, I decided that I would actually add some glitter just to try and fill it up a little bit more as well. So because I've put those pieces in first, the glitter will sink, but these pieces are in first, so they'll just sort of sink on top and it won't overtake. But for that reason, I did use that chunkier glitter rather than a fine glitter, because I don't want it to seep underneath and then not be able to see the little elements that are already in it. So this green glitter here is a really funky little one. I got it as a sample a while back, and I haven't had a use for it yet, but they're like little, I don't think I show a close-up of it, but they're like little tiny green circles. Some are hollow circles and some are solid circles. And I thought that would be awesome for doing the little wreath molds that I'm going to make in a minute, the little resin pieces with the wreath molds. I'll get my words out. So yeah, I thought I would use the green for those, but I'm just going to add some of it to the back of these as well, just to fill it up and make it really colourful. And because I'm going to then use it again, I don't have to worry about using another cup either. So I just added it into the I'll just be using the same cup. Now, I shouldn't be leaning over my moulds whilst pouring glitter. I usually try and avoid that, but because I'm trying to do it for the camera, yeah, I had a little bit of spillage there. If you find that you do spill glitter on your moulds, it's a pain. It will stick to the moulds, and if it's where you don't want it, you can always use a bit of sticky tape and that will lift off any of the glitter. Obviously not once the resin's in it, but if it's just purely the glitter which you've dropped onto the mould, yeah, you can use sticky tape to try and lift it off, and that, yeah, usually works quite well. And when I'm filling these moulds up, I want to fill them so that they're sort of right to the top of the mould. Generally, most resins will have a little bit of shrinkage as they cure. So if you fill it just below the surface of the mould and it shrinks, you might find that it dips in and then your piece has a weird dip in the back. So I always try and fill sort of right to the top so that way it's nice and full and any shrinkage isn't so noticeable. The only downside with doing that is that you risk it overflowing and having bits to clean up later. Okay, so moving back over here to these moulds, and I'm just going to do these wreath moulds. And I'm probably going to leave the bows and maybe do them out of polymer clay if I don't have enough resin today. I'm actually thinking the polymer clay might work better in those bows than it will in the resin. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I'll see how I go. I'll decide along the way. So something that I briefly mentioned before, but I'll just say it again, is that with glitters, when you're using your glitters in your resin, they will pretty much always sink. So there may be a few exceptions to that rule, but every glitter that I've used tends to sink to the bottom, which becomes the top of your resin piece. You might get the odd piece that floats up to the top, but usually the resin doesn't suspend within the resin. Sorry, the glitter doesn't suspend within the resin. Maybe if you experimented with the resin slightly set first before you mix in the glitter, you may find you can get more of a suspended look. But if you're doing it the way that I'm doing it, where you're literally just pouring the resin straight in, the glitters do sink to the bottom. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're designing your pieces. And afterwards I use some pigments and glitter, and so that's really important to keep in mind during that process, because otherwise the glitter can actually end up overtaking your pieces. So those pieces that I was just talking about where we don't want the glitter to overtake, that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to get my little mixing cups here and kind of like little shots. I'm going to pour little shots of resin in to each one, and then we're going to add our liquid pigments. So I'm only going to do a couple of pieces with these, so I won't need too much resin in each, and as I did before, I can always add a little bit more if I need to. So I'll actually start off with the glitter one first. So just adding some of this glitter. This is a very fine glitter, this one. So this one will sink to the bottom and it can very easily overtake the design if you're not careful when using it. So just give that one a nice stir in. And then the three colours that I'm going to use the hot pink, the yellow and purple. Now usually I would do say pink, yellow and blue, because that way if the colours mix together as they sort of cross over, they'll naturally blend and make a nice colour. I don't have a blue pigment though. Blue is just, or not a liquid pigment anyway, blue is just not a colour that I normally use, so purple it is. So just making sure I give these a really good shake first before I put them in. Generally you always need to either shake your liquid pigments or stir your pigment pastes, because during storage, like while you're not using them, the components that make them up tend to separate. So you'll notice that it looks a bit gross to start with, but once you stir it all up, they're usually good to go and you get good colour out of them. So yeah, just make sure you're stirring or shaking first before you use them. Powders obviously are fine, you don't have to worry too much about that. And the great thing about these pigments, especially these liquid ones, is that you don't need very much at all to make the colour nice and bright and vibrant. So I only used a couple of drips of each of these, and when you're using things like the pastes or the powders, they only take a little bit as well. Obviously the more you add, the stronger the colour is going to be, but you don't want to add too much just in case it affects the makeup of the resin. So just a couple of drips is fine, and then if you need to add a couple more, then you can do that. But yeah, just try not to add too much, and it's better to add less to start with, and then you can always add a little bit more. So anyway, on with doing my little Christmas trees here. I'm just doing some little drops of resin into them because I'd like them to be very multicoloured, nice and bright and multicoloured with that little bit of glitter through. So as I mentioned before, we don't want the glitter to overtake, so I've just done a little bit of the glitter, and even though I'm just dropping these resin colours in sort of little droplets, little circles, I actually don't want them to be little circles within. I'd like it to sort of blend through, and as I mentioned before, that pink and yellow should blend nicely to make a bit of an orange, and then yeah, adding the purple in should make a nice little blended colour as well. So I'm just starting off with a little bit of each, and then I'll go back through and add some more and keep adding until I fill up the mould. And I'll just keep adding the colours on top of the existing colour that's already there. So purple will go on top of purple, yellow will go on top of yellow, and so on. If I added the glitter on top of the yellow, the glitter will sink right down and you won't be able to see the yellow, you'll only be able to see the glitter. So that's why I'm going to try and keep it pretty much on top. And there might be a little bit of movement within, but yeah, try and keeping the layering of each colour on top of itself. So I actually had to stop filming for a while there because it was getting quite warm outside and my camera was starting to overheat. So you can see on the tray there that I did the same technique on the stars, and with the other Christmas trees I used more of those little Christmas add-ins that I had from earlier. And because it was starting to get quite warm, I just now had to kind of rush to finish off the designs. I probably took a little bit too long doing those other Christmas trees, especially the ones with those liquid pigments in, for the amount of resin that I had poured to work with today. So I'm just using just some straight glitter in this set of Christmas trees and candy canes. It's actually a really pretty mix of glitters, and so you'll see it close up afterwards once I show you the final pieces. But yeah, the candy canes are a little bit difficult to work with because you've got to make sure that you fill each of the gaps as well as down the edges. So because that second mold wasn't perfect when I made it, if you missed last week's tutorial, it had some flaws in it, so I wasn't 100% sure how it was going to work with the resin, but you'll see in just a moment as I demold what ended up happening with those other candy canes. Okay, so it is now a little bit over 24 hours since I made these pieces and the resin has cured. It's all nice and firm, so I'm able to demold. Most resins will take at least 7 days for a full cure, so I do like to leave them once I've demolded them for a little bit of time just to make sure that they're fully cured before I go and start drilling into them. I'm just going to demold this vase first. It's being a little bit difficult, but I couldn't 100% remember what that glitter looked like underneath, but there we go, nice and pretty. And by doing it as 2 layers, it gets that nice crisp line between glitter and the pink. So yeah, that one turned out nicely. Right, so on with our Christmas earrings. So these are the glitter ones that I poured last. So just a nice solid glitter. They're always really versatile and good. I can match them with a nice star afterwards. So these ones turned out really pretty. This mold here is getting a little bit old, so it is getting a little bit sticky. But I'm definitely happy with how those turned out. Right, the candy canes, this is what I've been talking about just before. So these pink ones were the ones that were in the molds that was a bit of a failure. So that one worked okay, but this one here, obviously I got some air bubbles in and the resin didn't go into those side bits properly. So there's holes there. So I'm not going to be able to use this piece, unfortunately. I might be able to find a use for the other candy cane. Not sure yet. I'll pop it to the side, but I might do some figurines or something that I'll be able to use it, or put it on make it a bit of a tag on a present or something. The other ones worked out well, so that's good. Right, I've got the wreaths here. And this was that glitter that I was talking about with the circles, which just looks amazing for those wreaths. And then I just did some circle discs as well. I'm thinking I might use the cricket later to do some maybe Christmas words on it or something. Not sure yet. If I don't get to doing that, I'll be able to use them for something else anyway. Okay, so these are the ones that I'm most excited about. Those little pieces that I put into them, it looks amazing. They look really good. I just have to go through and drill some holes through these afterwards. I think those little add-ins were just made of polymer clay, so they should be easy enough to drill through. They look really cool. I'm really happy with how those turned out. These ones, they are my absolute favourite. Look how they turned out. Nice and colourful and bright with those neon colours. I'm really happy about those. I'm definitely going to have to make some more. And these are the ones that I did first with the glitter behind. So just gives that little bit of a shimmer behind them. So they worked really well as well. Very happy with how those turned out. And then these ones I did the same sort of thing with the glitter and the pigment powder. So just putting the little bits of glitter in and then filling the rest up with the pigment powder. These ones were done with those liquid pigments as well. And the good thing about most of these, I didn't have very much spillage, so there's not a lot of cleanup that's going to be needed on each of these resin pieces. It is definitely much easier to keep things clean as you're making rather than try and do the cleanup afterwards. So I try not to have too many drips and drops all over my molds and try and keep my molds clean as well, because it really does help with cleaning up. So I also just used the last bit of the resin that I had to do a trinket dish. And that was again just with that pigment powder and with some glitters that I had. So that worked nicely too. There is a bit of a swirly mark in that pink. I wonder if that's from when I added it in or if it's a mark on my mold. I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so cleaning up. So as I just mentioned, most of these are fine, but what I will do is I've got my little scalpel knife here and I will just run that around the edge if I need to. That will help to just take off any bits that have overflowed and maybe spilt and not quite as clean as it needs to be. With these little Christmas trees, it's just in that corner bit there. So I do have a drill attachment as well that has the sanding attachment, which I will use sometimes. I do find it's a little bit harsh though, and it kind of rips at the resin a little bit. I do tend to use that more for like the trinket dishes and the propagation molds because they're bigger pieces. When it's something little like the earrings, I do find just using the knife generally works well, and sometimes I'll use the attachment if it's quite overflowed and quite a lot that needs taking off. Sometimes you can be lucky and just kind of knock it off with your fingers. You don't need to actually cut it or anything. Now, I know there are tools out there that you can buy specifically for this process. I do find the knife easier, that's what I prefer, but obviously if you're working with resin yourself, you can always experiment and see what you find to be easiest to work with. Now, I didn't mention before, but this is actually a week after that demolding. So I've left the resin long enough that it is now fully cured. So there's no risk of it bending or misshaping whilst I'm putting pressure on to do the to take off any of those extras. There's nothing I'm going to be able to do with that once. I'm just going to put him to the side. But yeah, it's a week later. They are definitely well cured and good to be handled and touched. So yeah, I always demold after about 24 hours, but all this extra cleaning up, drilling holes, all that sort of stuff, I always wait that week just to make sure that they are fully set properly. Now, once again, I missed a step. I forgot to film drilling the holes. I was doing a whole bunch of drilling and I just grabbed these and drilled them. Totally forgot to film it. So I've drilled all the holes into these. I just use my Dremel drill and I have a little 2mm drill bit that goes in it, which is just the perfect size for my jewelry making. So if the mold didn't have a pre-positioned hole, then I've just gone ahead and drilled, and I'm just using a baby wipe to clean it off because now there's little drill bits, little bits of resin on it from the drill, so I just want to clean that off so there's no dust left on them. I probably could just get a bowl of water and chuck them in there, but my desk is so full at the moment that a baby wipe is just easier and takes up far less space. So yeah, just giving them all a quick little clean up and then we shall assemble them into some earrings. Occasionally I get myself prepared and organised and pre-glue some earring backs so that I have them for days like today when I just want to assemble pieces. That way they can be completely assembled and I don't have to worry about waiting for glue then. So that is what I've done there. I've got some acrylic pieces, so they've been cut on the laser cutter, some stars and some circles and things. So I'll probably use stars for the majority of these earrings. Some I'm going to use some of the ball stud attachments also some hook attachments. I like to always have a range of different earring findings when I'm doing when I do a collection of earrings. If I'm selling them, which these ones will be going to some of the pop-up shops that I'm in, I like to have some choices for people because not everybody likes to have the stud tops, or not everybody likes the hooks. So yeah, I like to just do a different variety of them. So now I'm just playing the mix and match game, trying to see what's going to match up nicely, and then I'll be able to assemble them in just a second. This process can sometimes take me a while. Today I'm pretty sure that it doesn't take me too long. So that's a nice little wooden star, and it matches in really nice with the little brown chocolatey looking bits within those trees. And if you're wondering about those earring bindings, the ones on the top there on the stars, so I've glued my stud back posts on using E6000 glue. So that's generally the glue that I use for most of my jewelry making. The 6mm, you can see at that on those backs of those pieces, the 6mm refers to that pad size, which just fits nicely on the back of those stars. So yeah, they're all nice and prepped and done. So I'll be able to assemble these, card them up, and take them to one of my stockists this week. I've popped this into fast speed time-lapse mode because I didn't realise that the majority of my assembling here is almost out of frame, so it's a little bit hard to see what I'm doing, but I'll just talk you through it instead. So I've just decided to use the hooks for those elf hats because I feel like they don't need anything extra. Maybe I could have used a star, but I don't have any stars that coordinated well. My golds were a different coloured gold, and yeah, obviously then I couldn't use silver on them. So yeah, anyway, just went with the hook. Think that should be nice and simple and not take anything away from the actual elf hat itself. With the stars and the Christmas trees, I am using 8mm jump rings. I like 8mm. It gives enough room for both of the components, which are generally around 3mm thick each. Gives enough room for both those components to have a little bit of swing room and a little bit of movement there. So I do have a range of different size jump rings, so I can alternate them if I need them to be a bigger or smaller size. But yeah, eight's my general one that I use most of the time. Also, I'm using 2 pairs of pliers to open up the jump rings, and I am opening them I'm twisting them open rather than pulling them open. This just makes it much easier to close them up as well, because it will meet up nicely and the ring hasn't been distorted by if you pull it open. I'll go into more detail about that in some of my other videos, and I show examples. I'll have to try and find which video it was that I did it in. It's also important to remember to use 2 pairs of jump rings and don't put the pressure against your pieces. As tempting as it is, you don't want to snap your pieces. So 2 pairs of jump rings is usually the way to go. And now I'm up to the carding component. Thought I'd show you those reeds. They ended up turning out really well. I made the little bows out of polymer clay, so they actually worked really well. They look really good, so I'm really happy with those. I just wanted to show you these little rubber backs. When I'm using hooks, I like to use these. They're just cheap little rubber backs, and I'll put them on the back of the hook. It helps to stop them from falling out of the card whilst they are on display for sale. It also gives the customer the option to use them when they're wearing them in their ears as well, to help them stop falling out. I just like to add those on, so I just thought I would share that little tip with you guys. You'll also notice that I'm carding these up on my Miss Friday cards. Miss Friday is my little side jewellery business. So yeah, separate from my little craft house tutorials and shop that I have. So yeah, that's just my little side biz. So I'm carding them up on those because I've got some stockists that I'm going to take these to later in the week. And so this brings me pretty much to the end of today's tutorial. So thank you guys for joining me today. I hope I've given you some tips and tricks and maybe a little bit of inspo to do a resin collection for yourself. I really enjoy doing these ones. It is a little bit more effort than doing polymer clay, but the results are definitely really nice and sparkly because of the glitters, and yeah, I just really love these. I must admit I am debating which pair I need to keep for myself because I just have to keep something because I love them all. I know I can't keep them all, but I'm going to definitely keep a pair or two out of these. So keep an eye out over on Instagram and stories, and also maybe in the Reels section here the short section here on YouTube as well, and you'll see which pairs I decide to keep. So I'll be back again next week with another tutorial. I've got a whole bunch of tutorials I want to get done with Christmas decorations and Christmas gift ideas. Hopefully I can get them all done. Not too sure, but I will definitely be back next week with another Christmassy tutorial. So hope to see you then. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye.